Alrighty, so today I'm going to do another season preview that I'm highly anticipated to do because it is one of the team that I root for and the team that I root for dearly. And of course, is Minnesota United. So obviously, this off season, I've been actually pretty impressed of what the Loons have been doing this off season. They pretty much have checked off in terms of some of the things that they need to address this off season. It is pretty clear that this team needs more help in the midfield and even on the defensive area. And for the most part, they have make those signing to address that. Though, if there's one area that I really hope this team would address in the remaining part of the offseason, they need to get that DP level number six, or even the U22 initiative number six as well. As you know, they could definitely go two ways. Where if they do go in that DP route, then they'll pretty much fill out their DP spot in the U22 initiative spot. But if they decide to go with the U22 initiative spot, then it seems like they're going to the route where a team decided to have two DP and four U22 initiative. And even though that move hasn't really been completed, it seems like there are a sign that they are about to sign that DP number six or that U22 initiative number six to complete the checklist of how I think this team could be a contender in the Western Conference. Now, that being said, last season, I already talked about how chaotic last season was with this team. From them not having a head coach in the beginning of the season, having their GM, or in this case, the chief soccer officer, came in relatively late, and then the Reynoso saga that has happened. And yet, despite all that, they still finished with a sixth place finish with 15, 7, and 12 record, finish with 52 points. They once again made it back to the playoffs, but unfortunately, yeah, they did not do so well in the second round against the Galaxy. And I even said that what ever happened last year in the playoffs, with them just getting into the playoffs in general in a transitional year, it's going to consider a success. And even though that 6-2 loss was definitely a bit of a whimper end to what has been an incredible season for the Loons last year, it's still considered to be a successful season that they can build on this year, where maybe they're ready to be competing in terms of being one of the better team in the West. Now, the head coach for this team is Eric Ramsey. He's entering in his second season, and really his first full season with this team, because when he came in last season, he didn't really have a full season with this team. And the chief soccer officer is Kelly Al Ahmed, who of course is entering in his first full off season as well, because just like Aaron Ramsey, this team didn't hire a GM or a chief soccer officer to make the decision until really late into the off season last year, so he didn't really have much to work with in the winter transfer window. And now that he has a chance to do so, you can definitely start to see the signings that they need to do to get themselves back to being a contender and back to making the playoffs. Speaking of playoffs, they of course made the playoffs last year, and they also won a playoff series against Real Salt Lake as well. Now, in terms of some of the transfer that they made, so the first big move that they made, well, it's not really a big move, but they did get Kip Keller from the re-entry draft. I already mentioned before, I do like this signing in terms of depth pieces. Yes, I know Kip Keller is always going to be remembered in terms of that horror moment that he had against St. Louis on his debut, but he's definitely been improving, and he was a good depth piece doing his time with Cincinnati as well. And for depth reason, I think this is a good signing and a low risk high reward kind of signing for this Minnesota team. They decided to bring back Will Trapp. This was a questionable one because Will Trapp, he's very polarized in terms of the fan base. There's some Loons fans that he's good, and then there's some that said that yeah, it's time to move on from our captain. And throughout his time, I think Will Trapp has been kind of inconsistent. I can understand the frustration in terms of some of the Loons fans saying that he should not be still starting game day in and day out. But there's also times where he has done well, and even games that he steps up in a big way and really led by example of being the captain of this team. So they decided to re-sign him for one more years. And then this is where we started to get some of the signings that they did in the off season, and it's actually relatively recent. This team was really quiet in the off season until just recently. Starting off with getting a center back from Argentina, that is Nicolas Romero from Atletico Tucumán, and then also recently, as in just 2 days ago, getting another South Korean player, a South Korean midfielder, and Ho Yun Jun from Gwangju FC, a player that did very well not only in South Korea but was voted as the South Korean Young Player of the Year. And considering they didn't really have to give up too much and didn't have to pay for so much for that. I mean, I know obviously when it comes to South Korean player in MLS, not many of them has found relatively success. But consider the Loons didn't really have to pay too much in terms of that. It feels like this is a low risk, high reward kind of situation, and maybe he could also be used as depth reason for this team. Now, in terms of players that is no longer on this team, Michael Marquez, of course, going to Vester SK. What a waste of a signing this was from Minnesota. I mean, this was part of the old regime in terms of making some bad decisions. This was definitely one of the worst decisions that they made. A guy that randomly coming from the Norwegian second division, and yeah, it turns out he was pretty bad. So bad that I think it kind of goes back to there was that one game where he botched I think he was going forward and he kind of tried to be a little too cute in terms to dribble it up forward, and then he got the ball taken away from him, and eventually the Loons conceded a goal, and he pretty much was put on the Adrian Heave doghouse after that. So yeah, it turns out to be one of the worst signing that this team of course have made. They also declined the option of Hugo Baccara and Derek Dotson, and then of course Franco Fragapani, no longer with this team. We knew this was going to happen. Considered last season, it was pretty much kind of like a farewell game when he had against St. Louis City. I believe he's now back in Argentina. They also declined the option of Clint Irvin. This was a bit of a surprise because I know Clint Irvin is not starting goalkeeper caliber, but he's a good backup option as well, and I thought they would bring him back for another year, but they elected to not do so. The same goes for Moses Nyman and Zarek Valentine, of course, out of contract, and most likely, you could also say he has already announced his retirement with him being the host of the Sounds of the Loons podcast. And for those of you that don't know that podcast, that's the official team podcast of Minnesota United. I always listen to that podcast in terms of getting my daily Minnesota United news on this team. You also have Patrick Ware. His option was declined. Another player that, yeah, I just kind of feel like he was a wasted potential. You notice one other thing about this team when it comes to youth development, it's pretty much non-existent. I mean, youth development is the biggest weakness of this team. This team has always learned in terms of being near the bottom in terms of the youth academy, and it's kind of a shame because I really want to see this team develop some young players from the Minnesota region. Some of the players in the Minnesota region are actually decent player. I mean, a great example of that is Caden Clark of what he did with the Red Bulls. I mean, when he did come back, he didn't really do that much, but now look what he did with Montreal and even with the U.S. men's national team. There are some hidden gems around the Minnesota area, and it's a shame the club doesn't really take that as serious as they should be. But that being said, the other player that they let go, Miguel Tapias, of course, he got transferred back to Chivas, and from what I heard, yeah, he's not having a good time right now back in Mexico as well. I've heard some Chivas fans are not happy in terms of some of the performance that he's been putting. Alejandro Brun, of course, he's been loaned back to his native country in Costa Rica with Alajuelense. And then they also checked off in terms of one of the lists that I was hoping that they were going to address, and that of course is the Timu Puki contract. Obviously, there was question whether or not if the Loons were going to exercise the buyout of Timu Puki to get an extra DP spot because as well as Timo Pukki was in his first season with this team, it is pretty clear it didn't really quite work out. I mean, in his second season, he didn't really play too much under Eric Ramsey. He really just didn't fit the system that Eric Ramsey has had. And yeah, even though the Pukki party is officially over, he's definitely gonna. He's a guy that I will still remember in terms of some great memories that he brought to this team, especially that 4 goal performance he had against the Galaxy. I will never forget that. That was peak Pukki party that he did, scoring those 4 goals against the Galaxy a couple years ago. But nevertheless, they had to move on from him. And not only they were able to do so, but they actually didn't even have to use a buyout to do so. So that's an extra bonus where they actually now have both of their contract buyout if they want to exercise throughout the season. Now, looking at the first 5 games for this Minnesota team, so it's a bit of a daunting start to the season. They have to go on the road to play against LAFC in a game where, yeah, no pressure in terms of facing against a team that has a league record 7 consecutive season opener win. I mean, I'm pretty sure Minnesota might be the team to maybe break that up heading into one of the first game of the season. In fact, that's actually only the second game of the season after the first game of the season being Inter Miami and NYCFC. But they do return home in their season home opener against Montreal, so a bit of a Caden Clark derby we see in that game. Then they go on the road to play against the Quakes before go on the road to play against Sporting KC, and then they return home to play against RSL. So it's been a row heavy start to the schedule. Not surprised considering that playing in March. Especially the weather that is in Minnesota. Yeah, it's I mean, I'm actually really excited to see whether or not in that March 1st game in that season opener. I believe that game is actually going to be at nighttime. Are we going to get a snow opener? I always love to see a snow opener, and there could be a case of that could be the game if it is heading into this season. I remember we had that snow opener a couple of years against the Red Bulls. Well, I say it's a snow opener, but it kind of stopped snowing when we got to the latter part of the game. But nevertheless, we always love a little snow classico, especially early in the season in MLS. But looking at the last 5 games of the season, they first go on the road to play against San Diego before they return home to play against Chicago. Then they go on the road to play against Colorado before returning home to play against Sporting KC, and then they finish off the season on decision day facing against the LA Galaxy. Hopefully, they don't leave any playoff implication or any seeding until the final day of the season because, yeah, that is a daunting task to go on the road to face against the defending MLS Cup champion, especially what happened last time when they faced the Galaxy at the Indy Health Sports Park. Now, look at the strength of this team. It's definitely the attack. The attack is definitely the strong point of this team. We know that this team has a really good number 9. Kelvin Yoboa, what he did in half of the season, if he can do something similar to that, he easily is a 15 plus goal scorer and maybe, dare I say, a golden boot contention as well. And even the number 10 position as well, Robin Ludd has really stepped up into that role. I'm also hoping that Joaquin Pereira can also step into that role as well, even though he's not really a number 10, but he's more of a playmaker. But I expect that number 10 role is going to be held by Robin Ludd, and Robin Ludd, he just gets better as he ages. It's hard to believe how well he's been performing, and it's also so not surprising that last season there was a huge difference of why that Minnesota attack was so much better and found so much more creativity compared to what we've seen in previous season when Robin Ludd was out for the entire year because of a torn ACL. The weakness of this team, I'm still gonna say it's the midfield and also some depth in the defensive area. Yes, they are getting some reinforcement in the midfield, but until I believe that these reinforcements would actually turns out to do well, the midfield is still gonna be one of the biggest weakness of this team, and really kind of is the reason why I wouldn't really consider themselves so to be a top contender in the West because there's just too many times last season when I saw this team play. They're just getting overrun in the midfield or over and over again because this midfield clearly is not top contender material. And when you don't have a good midfield, yeah, you're not going to be near usually near the top of the standings or even be a contender with your respective conference. And the depth in the defense is also a bit of a concern. Yes, they added some more depth pieces on the defensive area, but I'm talking mostly in terms of the fullback position. And speaking of that, I'm actually going to get straight into skipping the first big question by talking about the second big question of this team. Will they actually get more depth in terms of the fullback position? Now, obviously, Eric Ramsey last season he has at times used the free at the back system. So technically, it's more like they need more wing backs on this team rather than actual tradition fullbacks. But ideally, I do want them to add another player or two in the fullback position because when you look at the depth chart, like the only guy I can think of that is a natural fullback on this team that's starting day in and day out is Rosales. And then after that, they also have DJ Taylor as backup option, though. Yeah, he's backup quality at best when I say in terms of that position. So let's say if one of those went down, and Rosa Rosales or even Longwane last season playing in that wing back position as well, there could be some concern with this team, especially of them not bringing back some of the fullback as well of this team in terms of the depth from last season. So that's going to be one area that I hope that they don't overlook. I mean, everybody have talked about they need midfield and defensive help. Don't forget about the fullback position as well. This team definitely is a little short in terms of that spot. But obviously, the first big question is, they need to get a DP6 or a U22 number six. Now, from what I heard recently, it seems like they're pretty close to doing so. If in fact, I heard there is this player coming out of League by the name of Owen Jean. Looks like he's gonna be the player that is gonna be the number six, and most likely it's a U22 number six signing rather than a DP6. So yeah, we'll see how whether that move is gonna be done, and if it does get it done, we'll see how he slotted into this team in day one, because I'm assuming he's probably going to be a regular starter for this team, because that is a spot that this team desperately needed for the past season or two. But I think the other thing that is a big question of this team: do they have enough when it comes to being a top contender in the West? I mean, if you look at their starting 11, um, this team does have the ability to be a contender in the West. Now, when they do suffer some injuries, then that's where the concern has to be, because I also would say that maybe the big weakness of this team is the depth. This team does lack a little bit of depth as well. But that being said, it will be very interesting to see that, with all the pieces are there, and if they can stay healthy, yeah, there could be a case that they could be a contender in the West, and they could be a team that could go at the likes of Seattle or the two LA team in the Western Conference. And this is why the first game is going to be a really big test. I think that first game against LAFC, I mean, I don't expect this team to win that game, because anytime when you face against the like of LAFC and how strong they are, it's always tough to try to come away with a victory, especially if the game is taking place at BMO Stadium. If they can get a win in that one, and I know usually the first week of the season you can't really judge too much on a team, well, that's a huge statement that this Minnesota team could make if they can pull off a win, or even at least look respectable against LAFC, because now there are the optimism that yes, this team could be a top four contender in the Western Conference. This team could actually go at some of the best team in the West, like the two LA team and even the Seattle Sounders as well. But in terms of expectation of this team, it's obviously playoffs, and maybe even get into the top four spot as well. I think the top four spot is definitely going to be one that they're aiming for. I mean, when I look at how the season is going to go, obviously the two LA team is going to be the threat. Seattle might be the other team that I think could be a threat. But then after that, I can definitely see Minnesota get into that fourth position, or even leapfrog some of those teams as well, because the rest of the Western Conference, I mean, it's pretty open when it comes to how they will do. But obviously, I'm excited about this team heading into this season. I'm also very excited that for once we don't have to worry about some chaotic nature that goes with this team. I mean, I'm kind of getting tired of seeing some chaotic nature of this team. I mean, I guess maybe that kind of helps this team, where sometimes when they have some chaotic nature, they kind of like the underdog mentality. They always fry at best. But for once, I just want this team to have a stable kind kind of viewpoint. And for once, I'm very happy heading into this season. At least we have a head coach. At least we have a GM, and also we don't have some unnecessary distraction off the field, like the Reynoso situation that we had almost all of the first half of last season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to leave a like, smash the subscribe button. If you're a Minnesota United fan like myself, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, and the free big question about this Loons team heading into this season? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.